This morning we begin week 38 of 2024. Going through fast, aren't we? This week we will read about and meet James. You know, there's several men in the Bible by the name of James. The author this week is Steve Lloyd. His first reading is a good reading. All the readings are good reading, but his first reading is a good reading about James. It's titled today, James the Author. Today's scripture is James chapter 1 and verse 1. We'll mention that in a moment. Here's what he writes in this first lesson about James in week 38. James, the author of the New Testament book that bears his name, identifies himself as a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's James 1 and 1. Many sources identify him as having been the brother of Jesus. He writes, the edition of the English Standard Version I'm referencing includes a paragraph introducing the book. It identifies the author in this manner. One of the earliest New Testament writings, AD 40 to 50 AD, somewhere within the 40s. It's believed to have been written by Jesus' brother James. This being the case, he writes, I find it intriguing that he did not make reference to this fact when he identified himself. This seems to be the sort of thing, he writes, I might highlight, and I probably would too, if I were a brother of Jesus, like James. But he did not. He simply identified himself as a servant. Again, drawing from the same edition of the English Standard Version, there's a footnote for the word servant. The footnote reads, or slave, a Greek bondservant, one that sells themselves into service. That's a bondservant. It's the same word Paul used with reference to himself in the introductory line of his letter to the saints in Rome, in Romans chapter 1 and verse 1. So both men, James and Paul, viewed themselves as slaves of Jesus Christ. It's striking to think that Mary had another son or other children, Matthew chapter 13, verse 55. When Jesus fills center stage, James could have capitalized on his family's relationship to his brother, but he did not. He emphasized his commitment to Jesus by writing that he was a servant, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. James could have emphasized the types of relationship he sustained with Jesus, brother or disciple, but he chose to emphasize the fact that he's a servant. Notice how many times this writer, Steve Lloyd, let me go back and make sure. Yes, Steve Lloyd. Notice how many times he's used the word slave. You know, in our world, that's just a terrible word. And it is for many reasons. But in Jesus' world, there were many slaves. And more we read where people were becoming slaves, bondservants of Jesus Christ. And that's what we should be. Sure, the word carries a terrible connotation in some speaking, but yet we are to be slaves of Jesus. And it's striking, he said, to think that Mary had other children and Jesus would take center stage. And James writes that he's a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus. He could have emphasized the other type of relationships as we just read, but he didn't. Think about the various relationships you sustain with Jesus. Now listen to that again. Think about the various relationships you or we sustain with Jesus. While each one of us could name while each one could name may be legitimate, every one we would name would be a legitimate thing to say, but which relationship would you emphasize? I'm a disciple. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower. I'm a believer. I'm a repentant sinner, saved by grace through faith. We could say a lot of things in our relationship to Jesus, but will we say, I'm a slave? Think about the implications of James declaring that he's a slave. Today, he writes, today, I will consider the implications of being a slave of Jesus Christ. Then he cites Romans chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. You might want to read that today, Romans 6, verses 12 through 14, that we are a slave to whomever we obey. Let's obey Jesus. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Hope you have a good Monday. I'll be subbing today and sort of kind of looking forward to that. Boy, yesterday spent a good day with the Solid Church of Christ. Met some people that I've never met before, and man, just enjoyed it so much. Good people. Good being with Josh Eldridge, the preacher there. He's a local Lauderdale County boy, a Center Hill Church of Christ young man, and doing a good job. And boy, it was a thrill. It was my first time to be with a church with home missions. Pray for this work. Pray for Jackie and I as we do this work at home missions. Pray for those that's sick and not doing well. Remember Steve Tucker. I didn't mention Steve Friday, and Jackie got on to me. She said, you was going to mention Steve, and I didn't. Steve needs our prayers. What a good, great man he is. Remember Norma Jean Rawls. We talk a lot about Harold, and we need to pray for Harold, continue to pray for Harold. But boy, Norma Jean's been sick herself and having a tough time of it, and pray that she's feeling better soon. Just pray for her being better. Remember all those we've been praying about that has cancer and taking treatments. Remember each one that you know of, the ones we've been mentioning every day. And just pray for those who are sick, but pray for those we need to bring to the Lord. Pray for those we need to bring to the Lord. Well, I hope you have a good Monday. See you sometime tomorrow.